So welcome everyone. In today's session, we're going to talk about the what, how, and why of Bi-Modal IT. My name is Thomas Joseph from Software AG. I'm running product marketing for BIM platforms and the operational intelligence platforms. And with me today to talk about the topic of the day is Sandy Kinsley from column2.com. So I couldn't introduce Sandy as well as she can. Sandy, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I will, Thomas. So I am an indie analyst covering business process management and related technology areas, plus social business, because I sit in that intersection between work and social and how we do work inside of organizations. I do for software vendors as an analyst, such as a white paper that I've written recently for Software AG that covers a lot of these topics that I'm going to be talking about today on Bi-Modal IT. I also help some companies with product strategy. Now, on the other side of my business, as a consultant, I work as a process architect or an application architect for end customer organizations. These are financial services and insurance, and I'm to implement these same technologies that I'm consulting on with vendors and that I'm writing about. As you mentioned, I write a blog about BPM and similar topics at column2.com, and I speak at a variety of conferences. Also, just received the 2016 Heim Award for significant contributions to the field of workflow. It was a huge honor.
Yeah, and it was actually great to meet you at BPM Next, where that award was given to you. So also congratulations from my side, of course. So let's jump to today's topic, Bi-Modal IT. It's a term you hear more and more in the industry, not necessarily only in the BPM industry, but really in the enterprise software industry overall. I think it's a term that's been coming up, more and more. So before we go into, talking about why someone should care about Bi-Modal IT, how you do it, would you mind actually giving us a brief explanation of what Bi-Modal IT is? What does it stand for?
Absolutely, and I do think it's kind of relevant that you mentioned that this is not just a BIP topic. This is really an enterprise software development topic, and I'll kind of talk about why it's really that important to sort of see that link there. The term Bi-Modal IT was first popularized by Gartner in 2014. I don't know if it was used before that. Prior to that, McKinsey had used a term called Greenfield IT, which had a very similar kind of meaning. But basically, if you look at Gartner's definition, Bi-Modal IT is the, quote, the practice of managing two separate coherent modes of IT delivery, one focused on stability, the other on agility. So, to generalize, mode one is stable and well understood IT delivery model. This is probably what's going on inside most organizations now for big infrastructure projects, for creating systems of record where you have these traditional development life goals, and you want to make sure that these systems are secure and efficient and accurate and all that type of thing. On the other side, the mode 2 development is a more agile and fluid environment. This is where you're doing rapid development and prototyping of new ideas. You're bringing in, as I say, methodologies, probably low-code development platforms, and more of a DevOps provisioning model where you have the developers working directly to do the deployment provisioning of things so that they can roll very quickly, so that you have a lot more business involvement and you have much faster iterations in the process here. So you look at how Gartner talks about it and how McKinsey talk about their Greenfield IT, is we're really looking at these as two separate modes, not as in the kind of functionality that we want to bring together into a single type of development. They have very specific targets where we're using the one, or what's sometimes called slow IT, to our systems of record, and we're using mode 2, or the fast IT, for the systems of engagement or systems of differentiation. So where we do a little bit more prototyping and so on. So we are looking at kind of separating these capabilities. Then we have two types of development groups, likely reporting up into very different structures within organizational structures within a company, and they're incentivized in different ways too, because they have one is focused on creating the legacy systems, the systems of record, the long-term infrastructure projects, and where 2 is more interested in trying out prototyping, doing innovation, and so on. So it's that kind of split between the two. Now, the important thing to think about is that, when we look at the types of tools that are used, and that's why I wanted to come back to your comment about how this isn't just for BPM, but BPM has an important role in here. What we're seeing with many BPM systems now is that they're being generalized to become full application development platforms in the area of these low-code application development. So we have now on the Mode 2 side, where we're doing fast prototyping and innovation, we need to be working with low-code tools, and a lot of the BPM vendors are sort of playing into this space now with being able to provide the low-code tools that the Mode 2 developers will be using, whereas the Mode 1 developers are using like the traditional, more like application methodologies and more traditional coding platforms as well. And as we'll see, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get things going from a strategy standpoint, but I really want to emphasize that we can't have these run as two completely separate and disconnected development teams or development groups within the organization. Although they will report to different areas, the different tools, we have to look at how they link back and forth between each other to have that divide between them bridged, and that's really critical. So, 2, this fast IT really relies on the information base and the services infrastructure that's created by Mode 1 teams, and then 1 is rolling on Mode 2 to do all that crazy innovation and prototyping, and then bring back the tested ideas that could possibly be rolled back into some of the more stable infrastructure.
Okay. Well, thanks for that explanation. So it sounds like Bi-Modal IT is really a type of a new corporate IT structure for fostering innovation, right? But I'm wondering, isn't that maybe just nothing new enable for citizen development or shadow IT, which we've already seen in organizations over the past few years?
I would have to say it is to a certain extent, and it's really funny when you look at the research on this. And I'm looking at primarily at the McKinsey and the Gartner research. So the McKinsey was talking about this greenfield IT in about 2013, and then Gartner was coming along in 2014 with Bi-Modal IT, which was really the same idea. And in part, they've taken this sort of new definition, and it just happens to describe these structures that we already have in place, like the citizen development that's going on, or the shadow IT that's going on, typically within business areas, that's taking up the slack where the traditional IT just can't do all of the development that needs to be done for these areas, or can't do it quickly. So in that part, they're kind of what we refer to as paving paths, where they see there's a pattern in place and they say, oh, well, let's fit a structure on top of that. But they also kind of say, well, where can we go beyond that? So I do think that they have started with this development and the shadow IT that's already in place, but are at ways in which we can then take this forward and create a more formalized arrangement. The problem that with a lot of the shadow IT and that's going on inside organizations is that it's quite disconnected from the standard IT departments, is that projects will go on, people will pick what tools they want to use, they won't have any methodologies for how to do things. There's no way for them to create and functionality that would be rolled back into the the mode, what we might think of as the Mode 1 development, the sort of standard IT development, and so they become kind of rogue developers out there doing their own thing. By Bi-Modal IT around this in development a bit more IT-like, so that it can become a bit more strategic, but we want to be really careful not to constrain it so that it loses its ability to be agile and innovative. Okay,
all right. That's an interesting thought there, how you describe these two sort of organizational sides of bimodal development. But go more a bit into the direction of Mode 1 projects versus Mode 2 projects, and trying to make this a bit more tangible for our listeners here. Can you give us a couple of examples of Mode 1 projects or Mode 2 projects that you've seen in the real world?
Sure. So, in general, as I said, Mode 1 is for building and maintaining systems of record, and Mode 2 tends to be for creating the customer and employee-facing systems of engagement and systems of innovation. So, for example, you could have a Mode 1 development group that's managed a long-term ERP modernization project or implementation project. You're going to use either kind of standard, the stages, you have well understood outcomes that you're going to have from here, and the development life cycle and the tools are much more traditional. You're going to go through this ERP development project. It's in the same way as everybody else's ERP development project does, in part because maybe competitive differentiation, but there's also a lot of infrastructure to deal with there too. It's not something you're just going to prototype in a day and then throw away if you don't like it. There's much more kind of serious development cycle that has to go on there. Now, let's in contrast, if we look at Mode 2, possibly want to be able to put in a case management application. And again, this is what I was talking about with the BPM tools being low code to be able to build and case management capabilities fairly easily. So if we want to put in, if we have a new regulatory requirement for some product quality assurance, and we want to be able to put a case management application in place in sort of emails and spreadsheets that we would normally be sending around to handle this sort of thing. So very much sort of starts as the sort of thing that might be taken on by a citizen developer, but we would have something that using appropriate tools, it might be leveraging information from that ERP system that's being implemented from one, so there has to be coordination between the two groups, and it's using tools possibly such as the BPM system in order to build the case management so that, for example, rules can be easily changed or processes can be easily changed. So it is looking at these where it's those stable systems that are, you think of it more as the infrastructure, and the systems that would be much more changeable and possibly customer-facing or employee-facing that are on the Mode 2 side.
Okay, great. So if you were talking to an organization that now says, we want to get started with implementing a bimodal strategy, what would be your advice both from an organizational and from a technology perspective to them?
It definitely things up. You do have to look at the technology, and you do have to look at the organizational side. So, from a technology standpoint, we're dealing with first of all, the application development methodologies are different, and the tools are different, and the skills often for the developers themselves are different. So, on one, you're probably using a more waterfall-like application development where you have requirements up front because you know what your requirements are in full detail before you even get started. So you can do things with the waterfall development environment. You could even outsource some of the development that goes on because it is fully specified before you begin. You're using a more traditional development language such as Java, which is being done by fairly highly skilled developers, technical developers. And it's that you use for going through things like from coding to testing to through various layers of testing and then rolling out to an organization is quite a rigid structure as you move along. If you look at technology tools on the Mode 2 side, in this case we're using low-code tools, but we need to make sure that we're leveraging the information that's created by those applications from the Mode 1 side. So there's we still have to look at how APIs and services are exposed from the Mode 1 systems of record and then be consumed by the Mode 2 applications. But these be built with local environments. We need to be able to prototype something quickly. We're probably going to be using some sort of graphical or visual designer to create applications themselves so that we can knock something together in a short period of time, try it out with people, and then if it doesn't work, throw it away for something else. The big difference is that with Mode 2, we don't necessarily have a set of specifications before we start. We probably have a goal in mind. We know that we want to achieve a certain outcome, but we don't know quite we're going to get there, what the application is going to look like. So we have the tools that can very quickly prototype and then roll out to a subset of business users to try out to see if that's going to work. So that's kind of on the technology side where we need to look at these different tools. And it doesn't mean that Mode 1 development can have agile characteristics or that Mode 2 development can't have some of the more stable procedures happen in a more traditional development environment. But you don't want to try to make them into the same thing because they're really very different folks in how moving forward with their application development environments. Look, if we take a look at organizational issues, so that's kind of the technology side, but if we take a look at the organizational issues, there's different thoughts, like if you look at what the analysts are saying and what some of the early adopters of Bi-Modal IT are saying, and some of the, well, you just bring everything in under IT. And so all these little groups out there that are doing this citizen development that are probably within the business areas, you have them report to IT. They become part of IT. And that you can have more control over what they do to make sure that they're using the right tools, that there's some standardization of methodology and so on. But there's others that are saying, well, that's going to fundamentally damage the benefits of Mode 2, and that they're going to get disconnected from the business units that they stay in. So I think that's one that organizations are going to need to kind of make and work on their own in terms of what the best sort of reporting and organizational structure is. You need to make sure that if you do bring the Mode 2 development groups under the IT umbrella, is that don't have the same sort of incentives as the Mode 1 development groups do, because you end up with just kind of having this on delivering code to specifications instead of delivering innovation in a very rapid, agile way.
Understood. So it does sound, though, that, establishing a formal Mode 1 and Mode 2 development organization is actually quite disruptive. Do you really think that the benefits actually justify that disruption? Would you say that this might actually just be, the latest analyst fad? What do you think? Well,
I think that there's benefits. Like if we look at what's going on now, Bi-IT in some form, like in the form of citizen development, is already going on in most organizations, even if it hasn't been formally identified. So we have, our IT development teams. They're on these long-term projects on the core systems of record, and then we have these citizen developers off in the business areas. And they're kind of filling the gaps. They're looking after all these short-term business needs, and they're prototyping new ideas. And the problem is that they're using tools. They're kind of gone off the reservation in terms of the tools that they're using, so that they're using spreadsheets and some random database and some tool that they found online and a variety of different things. So it's very hard to look at any kind of reusability or corporate standards around what they're doing. So just be able to get even the center of excellence for Mode 2 development, even if you're not bringing them in under a single IT umbrella, being able to establish at least a center of excellence for that type of development so that you can provide them with some standardized tools and maybe some training and methodologies to go along with it could really them to have a more standardized experience. And if we look at the benefits, like when I look back at the research that McKinsey did when they were talking about this greenfield IT, which is essentially the same thing as the Mode 2 IT, is they found a very strong correlation between the degree of innovation that would happen if you were at this kind of development and corporate growth. And they saw greenfield IT as really a way to achieve the innovation that you need to grow an organization. So I think that benefits to be had in terms of fostering innovation within the organizations and allowing, providing these citizen developers with the tools that they need to build these new innovative solutions. But it has to be managed really carefully so that you don't constrain what they're doing and kind of choke all the innovation out of what they're doing. You need to make sure that they can stay where they have a close contact with the business and still keep that spirit of innovation and creativity alive, regardless of what tools that they're using.
Well, thanks, Andy. I think it was really interesting to hear your views and your thoughts on bimodal IT, and sort of getting that as a first taste on that topic. To all the listeners on this session here, I would also like to point out that Sandy has written a paper on bimodal IT, which is being published on the same site where you just listened to this session. So be sure to download that as well and take a look. Sandy, any last thoughts?
I think we've covered a lot here. I think that just taking a look at your organization as you're working now, taking a look at the IT and the development that's going on, you'll probably find that you're already doing bimodal IT and you don't even know it. So good luck with that, and thanks for having me on today, Thomas.
Perfect.